Viewpoints on the Talk Station FM 107 AM 1240. Well, I'm not trying to connect a dot, but rather to say that this raises the specter of an issue that we've talked about numerous times here on Viewpoints, and this is, of course, having to do with insurance. And, of course, what I'm talking about here is the announcement yesterday of indictments and investigations associated with, financial support for a variety of political candidates, one of them being our Commissioner of Insurance, Mike Causey. But interestingly enough, Commissioner Causey was concerned about this and had himself made contact with the FBI to sort of bring this story to where it is today. So that is really not the issue here about that case, but it does raise the specter of concern for me on the topic of rate cases that we have before the commissioner. And we've asked Willo Kelly to join us. And, of course, Willo Kelly, she is the Government Affairs Director for the Outer Banks Association, Realtors and Home Builders, and has been frankly, our guru when it comes to insurance issues. And we have now the National Flood Insurance Program, which is up for renewal. And I was just calling Willo earlier today and said, where is all of this and what impact could this story have on the North Carolina rate cases? And if I'm not mistaken, there are 2 rate cases involved. And with that, Willo, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me again, Lockwood. My pleasure.
Well, you've got your very own chair, which you've occupied once in the past 6 years that we've been talking, maybe 8 years we've been talking. So,
yeah.
But we keep it dusted for you, prepared for you when you can get into the studio. A quick question. This event of the past 2 days related to the investigation, does that have any impact on our rate cases in North Carolina by any chance?
This will not have any impact on the rate cases in North Carolina. The homeowner insurance rate filing, of which, as you know, at the end of February was the public comment period held in Raleigh. And actually it was prior to that public comment forum session being held that the insurance commissioner issued notice of hearing, order of hearing, and that hearing, what that means is he denied the rate filing for homeowners insurance that was filed back in December, where there were up to 30% increases being proposed by the Rate Bureau. What this means is that the insurance commissioner scheduled a hearing, I think, to begin September 4th, I believe. However, that hearing, which is like a trial on the homeowner insurance rate filing, and the Department of Insurance presents their side, Rate Bureau presents their side, there's evidence, there's testimony. If we get to that point, I'm not sure. Let's just say I'm not sure that we'll get to that point, because what's happening right now is the Department of Insurance is asking for more information from the Rate Bureau, and they're submitting information. The Rate Bureau can be asking questions. What do you need, et cetera, et cetera. So during this whole process of preparing for the hearing, they may end up just reaching a settlement agreement, as has been done in the past. And we'll probably hear prior to September 4th that the Department of Insurance has negotiated with the Rate Bureau, and they've reached a settlement. And so we'll probably see perhaps some increases, maybe not as high as they have requested, because in his notice of hearing, Commissioner Causey did state that he felt that the requests were unwarranted.
And by excessive. The way, the request was how much for, and it's an average too, I might add. What was the maximum request?
The maximum, while it stated an overall statewide average increase, and I think that was 17.4% to be effective October 1st, 2019. In our coastal areas, the actual increase requested was 30%, and that was with the Rate Bureau being generous in capping it at 30%, because the indicated rate, as I stated before, and this is, I know, getting kind of in the weeds of it, through the rate filing in this very large 2,000-some plus page document, there's a lot of data. There's formulas. There's how you reach by territory, looking at loss history, looking at modeled future losses, what you come up with. And in the areas on the coast, the indicated rate of what is actually needed to provide for reasonable profit and to be able to cover, base loss costs and whatnot was as high as 98%.
Wow.
So what they're saying they need is a 98% increase. We're going to be nice, and we're only going to ask for 30. And hopefully somewhere along there, they'll, with what they've submitted and really looking at the modeling and the loss data that within the commissioner's order of the hearing, it was kind of suggested that they don't agree with what has been submitted, and hopefully we'll see a much lower, if any, increase. But he cannot order a rate if we go to hearing because of legislation that was changed a few years ago. Even if we go to hearing and it is warranted that through their data and review of that data that we should get a decrease, the insurance commissioner can only order a rate between the current rate and what has been filed. So,
wow.
That's
right.
if we go to hearing. But he can negotiate a settlement agreement as he's done in the past. So this is not going to affect anything to do with this lawsuit or the charges being filed. I'm sorry, not lawsuit, but the charges being filed. It should not affect the department whatsoever.
Well,
on this and another filing. There was actually one on mobile home.
That's exactly right. That's why I said 2 filings as well. Well, looking at this in relationship to the upcoming campaigns, and we're talking with members of candidates seeking the 3rd Congressional District. Let's talk about this in relationship to government and our representatives and, well, of course, the late Walter Jones. We've chatted with Congressman Jones in the past, and I know that he worked for this district with the Bigger Waters Act. As I recall, he even made arrangements for you to talk to folks associated with the Bigger Waters Act. And I apologize to the audience. I'm going to ask Willo very quickly to explain the act and then what work has happened in the past so that we can understand the importance of our representatives in Washington, D.C. So, Willo, let's share with us, if you will, again, the background on the Bigger Waters Act. And by the way, that's Maxine Waters, ladies and gentlemen. Bigger Waters Act and what Congressman Jones assisted in the years past.
Sure. And just to clarify, the State Department of Insurance oversees insurance with regards to homeowners, dwelling, with regards to auto insurance, et cetera, et cetera. On the federal level, because of the National Flood Insurance Program, it is through our members of Congress that we discuss any issues regarding the National Flood Insurance Program. So the State Department of Insurance has nothing to do with the National Flood Insurance Program.
Right.
And Biggert Waters, when passed, and I believe we were looking at that in 2012, we saw tremendous impact in that it was included in an 800 and some page bill that was probably on page 500 and something. I forget what the actual page number was, but it was deep in a very large bill that included reform to the National Flood Insurance Program. And this was supposed to be the end-all, cure-all to better improve the National Flood Insurance Program when it came to revenues where people should be paying their fair share, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because of the losses from Katrina, which caused the National Flood Insurance Program to have to borrow money from the U.S. Treasury to pay the losses from Katrina. So ever since the Hurricane Katrina slammed into New Orleans and elsewhere and created, such a deficit in the National Flood Insurance Program, there had been debate and discussion on how to fix, so to speak, the program. So this bill was passed. And in reading the bill after it was passed, because, of course, we're relying on our, national lobbying folks that are there working on our behalf to ensure that what is being done is going to be in the best interest of property owners, policyholders, and how we can make the program work without causing people to lose their home. Well, what happened was the Bigger Waters Act passed, policies were re-rated in a different manner.
Right.
And people were seeing tremendous premium increases, up to $30,000 for coverage in 1 year.
That's a number.
And I know it's mind-boggling. I know people will say that's a myth. It can't happen. It did happen. It has happened. There's a gentleman down in Emerald Isle that is a case study for this and how it impacted him, where his neighbor was paying $800 a year in flood insurance, and he was hit with a $30,000 plus flood insurance bill. So it was not a myth. It was reality, and it was reality, harsh reality for some folks, that you're in the middle of a mortgage. You could be 10 years in a mortgage and then all of a sudden get hit with something that you are mandated to have with a mortgage,
right,
of which could force you into foreclosure. And so that was the argument. Look what you've done with the stroke of a pen, Congress. You are forcing, and this isn't luxury vacation homeowners. These are people that live year-round in our communities, which are required to have flood insurance. And with the stroke of a pen, Congress was forcing people into foreclosure. That, or keeping them landlocked to where their houses became now less marketable. They couldn't sell them. They had to find cash-only buyers. And we screamed as loud as possible. And I remember John Boehner saying at the time, we will not go back and look at anything with regards to flood insurance. We passed this bill. It's done. Well, because of the outcry and just outrage from some of these coastal communities, Gulf Coast communities, folks in Florida, up and down the East Coast, of how they were impacted, Congress could not ignore it any longer. And so in 2014, there was a bill passed called the Homeowners Flood Insurance Affordability Act, and that righted some of the wrongs of Biggert Waters and kind of readjusted what people were going to have to pay. But we're still here. It is 5 years later. We're still talking about flood insurance reform, and I had the utmost respect for Congressman Jones in that some of the issues that we put down on paper and we said, okay, and I'm almost like consumer advocate here. Here's Willo Kelly on the Outer Banks, just saying I've read everything I can read on the flood insurance program through Congressional Budget Office reports, through other studies, et cetera, that Congress itself had done on the flood insurance program. And I said, there is a big problem here. You're not addressing the elephant in the room. In the way the program is managed and the way it is administered, we've got to take into account like what's happening here. And, there was a show that used to be on said, are you smarter than a fifth grader? Mm-hmm. And I think any fifth grader could tell us, when you look at the revenue coming in and what's being paid out before any claims are paid, what the public didn't know was in the years after Katrina, current policyholders, within every given year since Katrina were paying in their premium to the extent to pay $1 billion in interest on the debt from Katrina. So Congress was charging itself interest on the debt. I mean, its own program, we were paying that money into the program for just the interest on the debt. So you take that out, and you're not paying down any principal on that debt. That's why I had a hard time saying the program was subsidized, because it was a loan from the U.S. Treasury, not written off. It was a loan, and until Trump here recently wrote off some of the debt so that they could still borrow with all of the devastating floods that were taking place elsewhere, inland in Texas and whatnot. The program, there were many areas of the program that I saw, weren't being addressed. Congressman Jones took a letter I wrote to Jeb Henserling, who was head of the Senate Finance, and also Maxine Waters. Mm-hmm. And Maxine Waters read the letter, and he pushed and tried to get others in Congress to say, look, we need to have this conversation. We need to look at flood insurance reform. This is affecting closings in Greensboro, North Carolina. Right. This is not a coastal issue. Right. This is, larger than just, the coastal vacation rental home kind of thing impact. That was the argument. Well, if you live on the coast and you got this, and we're subsidizing having, these homes built on the coast. And so he set up he pushed, and I actually had a conference call with Congresswoman Maxine Waters for about
See,
20, 30 minutes. And Walter did that.
This is one of those issues. We're going to take a quick break, come back and wrap it up with Willo Kelly here in just a moment. But this is one of those issues, Willo, that I fear many of us have ignored and not intentionally. We've got a lot on our plate, but one that can have significant influence. And we're, of course, talking about the rate cases in North Carolina, but also the National Flood Insurance Program, NFIP. And I will wrap it up with what Willo suggests we do going forward as we get into the election, but also post-election, because the NFIP program is up for renewal, and
changes are coming with regards to rates. Already in place.
Stay with us here. We'll wrap it up with Willo Kelly in just a moment here on Viewpoints on the Talk Station FM 107 AM 1240. Viewpoints on the Talk Station FM 107 AM 1240. Remind you about our sponsor for the afternoon, Advanced Water Systems, the people that bring you Connecticut, folks that are, well, practically reinventing water. And as always, to remind you, outstanding service. And Jerry, the science guy, was talking about hard water today. Well, the folks at Advanced Water Systems will tell you about softened water. To find out more, give them a call. 252 area code of our listening audience. And, of course, they have numerous locations. Old Cherry Point Road in New Bern, 635-6222. That's 635-6222. Home offices, showroom, Highway 70 East between Newport and Morehead City, 223-4444. That's 223-4444. Or go online to ConnecticutNC.com to learn about soft water, purified water, and purified air as well. That's Advanced Water Systems. Willo, we've only got about 30 seconds to go. Wrapping this up, the whole issue of flood insurance, obviously, this is a topic that a lot of the voters aren't thinking about, but this is one that we should be considering in our candidate forms as well, should it not be?
Definitely, because it is something that impacts the affordability of housing and the ability of one to maintain their mortgage. And we're looking at a new rating structure. They're calling it Rating 2.0 in the National Flood Insurance Program, where they are saying that a property owner needs to pay more based on their actual risk. And, you know, we're going away from national flood insurance to now you're gonna look at it per community. And the unfortunate thing is we are now going to be rated based on our distance to water. And arguing this point again with Congressman Jones and him taking that ball and rolling with it and trying to get some attention to that this is not where we need to go. It's a national program, and instead of spreading the risk, we are narrowing the risk. And that means there are going to be a lot of people paying more. Okay, stay with me. I'm going to chat with you briefly off air. We're going to continue this conversation with Willo Kelly in the next week. So stay with us here on Viewpoints.